Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going with another conference preview podcast. Today is the Patriot League, getting a lot of sparkle and shine. One of my favorite conferences out there in all of college basketball. Not a ton of transfers. You have guys that actually care about the academics and the love of the game, so this is going to be a nice, refreshing podcast. Here in the first segment, I'm going to be taking a look at the styles of play and betting trends of the Patriot League. In segment number 2, our good friend Rob Donaldson does great work with youtube.com/Rob Donaldson for the Rob's Best Bets show. Additionally, Underdog Fantasy, he's going to join me. We're going to take a look at all 10 of the rosters, and then in the final segment, I'm going to get you guys my projector or finish for this fine conference. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter. So, as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Now, anything that we saw in college basketball on Thursday, I will polish that up on the podcast tomorrow. I do want these conference previews to be standalone podcasts, whether you're listening in August, September, October, even November as the season starts. I want to make sure that you get great insights, and that way they can be evergreen and just get you prepared for what I hope to be the greatest college basketball season of all time. And these mid-major conferences, they truly do deserve their sparkle and shine. So let's get down to business. Let's take a look at a Patriot League where you do have a lot of teams that play at a little bit of a slower pace. Like you saw last year, there were 3 teams in the bottom 75 in terms of total possessions per game. As a matter of fact, 3 teams in the bottom 60 in terms of total possessions per game. Boston U, 340th in the country in terms of total possessions, a team that absolutely bombed from 3. They were a top 10 team in all of college basketball with regards to three-point shooting percentage. Holy cross, ever since Dave Paulson has taken over, they've been a solid three-point shooting team, 333rd in terms of total possessions per game. Navy was 325th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, so some clear slugs out there. You do have a few other teams that they're not really going to be looking to run it and gun it, to say the least. Like, for example, a Lehigh, they played a little bit faster last year, and as one of the faster teams, they were 213th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Lafayette, 283rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Ever since John Griffin has gotten to Bucknell, they've sped things up a little bit, but even they were 261st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. For Loyola Maryland, they were 156th. We're noticing John Loeffler trying to be able to push the envelope just a little bit more for them, but you do have a lot of teams in this conference that they are looking to tone it down a little bit. Colgate, they were about 205th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, so a little bit of a faster team out there. And then for Army, they're just looking for anything whatsoever at this point, 194th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And in this conference, three-point shooting, it truly does reign supreme. Boston U, who was able to upset Navy in the conference tournament last year after Navy went 17-1 in Patriot League play last year. They were 5th in the country in terms of three-point shooting percentage. As a matter of fact, at home, they were 4th at 42.5% three-point shooting. So they were a nice dynamo out there. You look at a team in Army U, they were at the bottom of the conference last year, 278th in the country with their three-point shooting percentage. Bucknell took a lot of steps back under John Griffin last year. They were 328th in the country with their three-point shooting percentage. Colgate, not as effective as they have been in the past. Over the last 2 or 3 years, they were 81st in the country in terms of their three-point shooting percentage. It was still solid, but not quite the Colgate that we've seen in past seasons. And then you've got a hodgepodge of sort of other teams. For Loyola Maryland, they were about 251st in the country with their three-point shooting percentage, and they were very much an either here nor there team. Holy Cross, 252nd with their three-point shooting percentage at 32.5%. Navy was a little bit of an exception to the rule because Navy, they were just so good on defense last year. A top 30 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. You just don't find that in the Patriot League very often. And even still, they were 64th in the country, shooting 35.8% from three-point range. Lehigh was 56th. They bombed it at a clip of about 36.1% from 3, and you want to be noting that a lot of teams in this conference, they really don't push the issue. You're not going to get a lot of turnovers. You're not going to get a lot of second chances. American is looking to really, shall we say, upset the apple cart. They were 40th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. That was by far the high mark in the conference. Now, Bucknell was able to be 96th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Then you've got some more, shall we say, average teams like Lehigh was 199th in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Colgate, they were more around about 265th. Loyola Maryland, they were 268th. Lehigh was a team that was able to be relatively country average at about 199th. And then additionally, with Lafayette, a little bit of a wet match in a dark cave sort of team, 272nd in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. And Holy Cross, 330th. They were not a team that really pushed the issue whatsoever. That led to their demise, and we're going to see if they're going to be able to muscle up on defense as well. And for Boston U, I should point this out. While they were a team that was absolutely tremendous with their three-point shooting, what have you, defense was very much optional, and they were just 353rd in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. So despite being a top 5 team with regards to their three-point shooting percentage, they actually finished 4th in the conference last season. And mentioned it, this is a conference where you don't have a lot of teams that are going to give themselves second and third chances whatsoever. Out of your 365 Division I teams in college basketball last year, Holy Cross was 360th in terms of offensive rebound percentage. They rebounded just 19.2% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. Now, the rest of the teams were better, but some of these teams weren't a whole heck of a lot better, like Lehigh, 349th in the country. They rebounded just 21.2% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. For Bucknell, 296th in the country. They rebounded about 24.7% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. Colgate, 305th. They were rebounding about 24.4% of their misses. Lafayette was a team that was 327th with this regard. You go down the list to a team like a Loyola Maryland, who was actually relatively decent down low, but still they were 274th in the country with this regard. Boston U, who's typically really good on the glass, 266th in the country. Navy was a team that was able to give themselves some second and third chances. That's why they dominated the conference. 110th in the country in terms of offensive rebound percentage. For American, they were 295th in the country with this regard. So not a lot of second and third chances being had here. And if you take a look at the betting trends in this conference, because I outlined it, you got a lot of teams that they don't necessarily play at the most rambunctious of pace. Additionally, in the Patriot League, you do have not a lot of travel out there. You've got a bunch of teams out there in the northeast part of the country, which is always something I love, and you've got the home court advantage in the Patriot League tournament as well. That's something that always brings a smile to my face. And when it comes to these teams, we saw some teams that just absolutely dominated against the spread. Navy was your top team, 20-11-1 against the spread. Colgate, we expected more of them. They went 12-19 against the spread. Army was 12-18 against the spread. Bucknell was 14-19 against the spread. It was neither here nor there for a lot of these teams because you pretty much had 4 teams that were below 500 against the spread, 5 teams that were above 500, and then you had one even-Steven team over there at Holy Cross at 15-15. Loyola Maryland was 15-14-1. American was 16-14, 18-14, and 18-14-1 for both Boston U and Lehigh. So these teams were sort of wishy-washy, up, down, all around, and it was a conference that the underdogs that they hit big. Lehigh was 12-8-1 against the spread. Boston U was 8-4 against the spread, but then Bucknell was 8-14 against the spread. Then after that, Navy was 2-3. Lafayette was 9-11 against the spread as an underdog. American was 5-6. So again, neither here nor there, but the favorites, in my opinion, were the teams that really got swallowed up if you were consistently a favorite, aside from Navy. Navy was 18-8-1 against the spread. They took care of their business. Loyola Maryland was 5-3. American was 11-8, and then Boston U 10-9, 5-4 for Lafayette, 5-5 for Bucknell, 5-6 for Lehigh, and then Colgate 7-15, and then Army was 0-4 against the spread as a favorite. So just not tremendous there. In terms of being able to hit the road in the Patriot League, a lot of teams had success, other than Lehigh, 6-9 against the spread away from home. Bucknell was 7-10, Colgate 7-9 against the spread away from home. Loyola Maryland went to 7-8-1, but how about Navy, 10-4-1 against the spread away from home. Lafayette was 10-6 on the road. Boston U was 10-8, and then you had a pair of 8-7s with American and Army. So maybe not the most demonstrative splits there, but certainly some interesting ones. And then when you dive into the totals out there in the Patriot League, you had a pretty overwhelming conference. Only 2 teams played more unders than overs. Bucknell, who really had a nice tempo dip from what they had in season number 1 under John Griffin, 20 unders, 13 overs, so that was a 60.6% hit rate to the under. And then Navy, 15 overs, 17 unders. They played really good defense. For Holy Cross and American, they both went 15-15, so 50-50 on the overs and the unders. And then a lot of teams played overs, and they were profitable, but they weren't necessarily demonstrative. Like your best over team was Lafayette, 18-13 to the over. And then you had 17 overs, 13 unders for Army and Loyola Maryland, 18 overs, 14 unders for Boston U, Colgate, 17 overs, 14 unders, and then Lehigh, 18 overs and 15 unders. And if you're trying to see, was this conference games, was this non-conference games, games, what have you. In terms of conference play, it was the exact same. Only 2 teams played more unders and overs. American, 13 unders and 6 overs in conference play. Lafayette, they had 10 unders and 9 overs in conference play. For Holy Cross and Bucknell, they were both 10 and 10. And then a lot of teams that they played more overs than unders, but it wasn't anything rambunctious. Colgate was 12 overs, 8 unders, 12 overs, 9 unders for Lehigh. Boston U. Navy was 11 overs and 9 unders, and then 10 overs, 9 unders for Army and Loyola Maryland. So those are the betting trends of the Patriot League and the styles of play. Coming up next, let's flesh out all 10 of these rosters with our good friend Rob Donaldson of Underdog Fantasy right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peters, and now a part of the Decent Family Podcast, the Patriot League Conference Preview Edition. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peters, and now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. This is a Patriot League Conference Preview Edition, and how about if we get on one of the masters of mid-major basketball? That'd be Rob Donaldson. He's doing such great work over at Underdog Fantasy, whether that be on the football front, college basketball. When that's in season, he does an amazing job there. I know that this time of year, he does an incredible job taking a look at baseball. You're able to follow all of his shows over on youtube.com/Rob Donaldson, on Twitter/X at RobDFB altogether. And Rob, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Greg. I always love diving into the mid-majors, and the Patriot League fits that bill. It was an awesome, conference tournament for the Patriot League last year with some crazy buzzer beaters. And honestly, I just like that this league almost year over year is just very, very itself. There's a lot of craziness happening in college sports with players going to the pros, coming back from the pros, going overseas, coming back. I just like that the Patriot League is a Patriot League. It's very straightforward, and I enjoy that.
Yep, me too. It's very nice when you don't have 100 million billion transfers and you've got some chemistry, and I feel like I can very much speak to this one. I don't think that Army is going to be winning the conference. 343rd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis at home. Now, Tate Lakowski, who was their top rebounder last year with about 5.3 rebounds, is back. You've got a few guys like Dylan Watt and Duke Brenner who might be able to step up. Dylan Brenner, I should say. Jason Holloway, he was a guy that averaged 10.5 points per game. Want to get your thoughts here on Army because I felt like turning it over to Kevin Quick was the wrong move. They let go of the old regime too soon, and really without Jalen Rucker, this has been a program that since he left has been absolutely awful.
When you're talking about Army, it is one of those things where Navy has seen a lot of success as kind of this military academy over the years, and obviously they've really taken it to a whole nother level within the Patriot League. But Army is just kind of one of those teams that every single year feels like they're undersized because they are undersized. They feel like they don't have the most athleticism or the best scoring because they don't, but they're always relatively, competitive in terms of interleague play. Now, yeah, kind of to your point, I don't expect them to be at the top of the Patriot League when it's all said and done this year yet again. But when you're talking about just the trajectory of the program or the state of the program, they can do a lot worse than Kevin Kuick. That is 100% the truth. And we'll see what the ceiling is. It probably is going to be somewhere along the lines of a bottom 4 team in the Patriot. But at Army, what else can you really expect?
Yeah, with Army, it's just going to be an uphill battle for them, no matter who the coach is, no matter what the year is. And I think this team is interesting because for Bucknell, they were atop of the Patriot League 2 years ago. big giant fall off there. They lose Armand Doris, who was really their top guy last year. They were just not good on offense. 328th in terms of three-point shooting percentage, 328th in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, 296 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they don't return a ton from last year, but am I a schmuck to think that they find their way back into the middle of the conference with bringing back Jalen Williams, who he was able to give the team 4 assists per game, and Kyle Marshall, one of the rare transfers coming into the Patriot League. He comes over from Air Force. I think he could be a player in this conference right away.
When you're talking about John Griffin, too, obviously this is a coach that in this 3-year, 4-year tenure at the program, they've actually seen some really high highs. I mean, they tied for first just 2 years ago for the conference standings. The year prior, they finished second. Last year was the weird kind of crazy fall off where I actually was thinking that potentially Bucknell could go out there and make something happen despite losing quite a bit in the portal to, higher majors, and it didn't come to fruition. They went 10-23 overall, 6-12 in conference, finishing 8th in the league. And that just doesn't kind of feel upside to the standard. So when you're talking about the Patriot League, a lot of these teams, they get picked apart, right? There's not a lot of NIL to go around. And so it does lend itself to a lot more of that volatility. But when you're talking about somebody with the pedigree of, say, like a John Griffin, where we've already seen the success year over year, I tend to think kind of alongside you, I feel like they're going to be back in the top 4 when it's all said and done this season, just inherently. And ultimately, we'll see really early on kind of what their style is, because last year they just didn't really have one.
Yeah, they very much did not have one, but this is a team that I think has a very distinct style. For Boston U, you know that they're going to be playing super duper slow, and you know that they're going to chuck it up from 3. They were 5th in all of college basketball in three-point shooting last year. That defense just was not good, even though they weren't giving up like 80-plus points per game. That was only because of the slow tempo. They do lose a lot of those guys, like Chance Glyden, who he was the guy that hit that big shot that knocked Navy out of the Patriot League tournament last year. Now, Kyrone Alexander, who missed all of last season due to injury, he returns. That's big, and there are certain things I don't like about Boston U. They've got to be better on defense, but man, this is a team that you know is going to slow you down, and they've got a lot of guys that they played either sparingly or not at all last year that they come back as essentially reinforcements for a team that did lose a lot in the portal.
Boston U, this is obviously one of the longer tenured coaches in this conference, along with Brett Reed over at Lehigh and Langle over at Colgate, but when you're talking about Joe Jones and the way that he's just, to your point, they have a style that they stick with year over year over year. This goes all the way back, 15, 16 seasons of them putting out a product that is very, very competitive within this conference. And usually they're, you can make them a shoe-in to kind of finish in the top 4 of this league. And once again, even if you do look at kind of the names on the paper and not a lot of them grab your attention, you know that their style, distinctly so, is going to cause problems for a lot of these teams. It always does. It will continue to do so. If you want another team that just to kind of blindly back against the spread, whether they start off hot or whether they start off slow in non-con play, ultimately it doesn't really matter because they will get leveled out at a certain point. And so, yeah, go ahead and put me down for Boston U finishing in the top 4 once again in the Patriot League. It just kind of feels like that happens every single year.
Yep, they'd always find a way up there. And again, they're going to need to be a little bit better on the defensive side of things. They were very much leaking oil there, but this is a team that they love to bomb it from 3-point range. And we always love having Rob Donaldson on this podcast. He's joining me for the Patriot League Conference Preview Edition right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And this team, for the longest of time, has been the big bad wolf out there in the Patriot League. Feels like there might be a little bit of a changing of the guard, though, for Colgate. Typically, you've got that one do-it-all guy. It dates all the way back to Jordan Burns, Braden Smith, list goes on. And it might need to be Andrew Elikasenko. Hopefully you got that correct. That's a hard last name to say. He was averaging about 14.5 points, 7 boards, 2.5 assists per game, but typically it's a guard. He's a little bit more of a big man, so I've got question marks there. Love Sam Wright, love Parker Jones. This is always a team that's very efficient on offense, but for Colgate, have a little bit of concern that this team did not give themselves second chances on the glass, and it feels like the Patriot League over the last few years has caught up to them.
I'm right there with you, because when you look at just kind of the dominance in, the totality of this tenure for Langle at Colgate, if you count the COVID canceled year, 6 consecutive seasons where they won the conference tournament, to spellbound themselves into the round of 64, and they just never got over the hump with Langle, which is unfortunate. It is a very high variance style where they got to make their shots in that type of one game off scenario against superior teams to pull the massive upset. But it always kind of felt like within the Patriot League, they were going to get the job done. That was the definitive. Now, over the last 2 seasons, we've seen 2 seasons worth of this. That model of just kind of trotting out their 4th and 5th year guys that grew within the program year over year over year, they're getting picked apart. They don't have those guys anymore. A lot of players that they're running out there are super inexperienced first-year players grabbing their first minutes of their collegiate career at this level. And kind of to your point, when that's the dynamic at play and you're not just hoarding the talent within the league, the rest of the league has that opportunity to catch up. And, obviously, when you're talking about their finishing in the standings last year, they still finished tied for second. So maybe the demise of them bottoming to the barrel isn't necessarily accurate. But when we are kind of so used to Colgate being the dominant force in this league every single season, and now we've seen a subsequent third place finish, followed by a second place finish, and also followed by just play that didn't really feel up to their standard as a program. Absolutely. Colgate, for me, just based on brand, is a kind of a fade, going into the season. I still expect them to win a lot of games in conference play, but just not up to the standard of them going 17-1, 16-2 within the conference.
Yep, I'm right there with you. I don't think that this is going to be a team that's going to be what Army was last year or anything like that, but also I do not expect them to be the same dominant team that we've been seeing over the last few seasons as well. And then I think that this team is going to be a fascination because for Lafayette, it's been a little bit wackadoo for them. I remember they went like 0 out of conference, and then they caught fire like 2 or 3 years ago within the conference. I'm just not feeling good about this team. They lose 5 of their top 6 scorers in a conference where retaining your guys is key, and a lot of teams are able to do so. Like Sharif Jackson was averaging 10 points and 5 rebounds per game last season, but this team has been relying upon a solid low post play over the last few seasons. They don't seem to have a lot of that. They're bringing in some like Shelton Henton, who is solid over at Colorado School for the Mines, but when you're bringing in guys from Colorado School for the Mines, that's probably not a place where you want to be. And I think for the Lafayette Leopards, well, they're going to be asleep towards the top of the conference because I think that they're going to be towards the bottom.
And kind of the theme, I would say, for pretty much every single team in the Patriot League, and this really applies to a lot of the mid-major level teams that are kind of on this lower end of the spectrum within the totality of Division I basketball, really comes down to how great your coach is. And the Patriot League is one of those weird leagues where a lot of the successful coaches, when they've had successful runs, they just stay. Brett Reed, after beating Duke and with CJ McCollum and that Lehigh run, you would just assume that he would jump ship. Well, no, 10, 15, 16 years later, he's still at Lehigh. And when you're talking about just Mike McGarvey, he was somebody that coached under Matt Langle at Colgate during the same tenure that Matt Langle stood out at Colgate. And he came back to the Patriot League to compete against Langle, Colgate, the rest of the Patriot League at Lafayette. It really started off inspiring, in my opinion. When you're talking about his kind of first real season as a head coach, there was a lot of bright points where they went 10-8 in conference play. They finished second in the standings. But the last 2 seasons that have kind of followed that, and yes, again, teams get picked apart at this level, so you got to kind of handle the volatility of roster turnover. That's always a dynamic at play, but ultimately you got to have a coach that can level out those waves, and we haven't seen that kind of be able to do so. They've won 7 games in conference, 8 games in conference in back-to-back years. It doesn't really feel like they have an inspiring product or an identity like a number of these other teams, and once again, I feel like Lafayette is going to be playing near the bottom of the Patriot League standings, in my opinion.
Yep, I am right there with you, and I think that this team might be towards the bottom as well. Loyola Maryland, who they had an okay year last year, but those guys like Jordan Steinke, along Jacob Theoduso and company, they're all gone from seasons ago, and they're relying upon bench warmers from other places. DeAndre Harrison, who was over at Kansas City, an awful UMKC team, 2.8 points per game. Abdullah Amzil, he was glued to the bench over at UC Davis. Louisiana Monroe transfer Alex Hugo Carrasco, 1.8 points, 1.9 rebounds per game, and they're relying upon Troy Cicero, who averaged about 6 points per game last season. Sam Springer averaged 5 points per contest, and, well, it looks like the three-point shooting will be fine. I don't know where the low post play is going to be. I don't know who's going to be bringing up the ball for this team, and for the Greyhounds, well, I think it's going to be 50 Shades of Grey and not in a good way.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? I thought the Loeffler tenure would be a little bit more, something a little bit more at this point. 2 years ago, I actually felt like, despite them finishing eighth in the conference, I thought they had a lot of fun, exciting guard play that could really push the ball up the floor. And last year, they tried to take on that same stylistic characteristic or character around their team. Just kind of flatlined. It didn't really move me in any sort of way. When you're watching a Loyola Maryland game, you're just kind of thinking, oh, this is just a AAU ball or community college trying to figure it out sort of team. The reason why I was initially so excited for Loeffler is he kind of fits into the element of, hey, coming from a Division II, Division III level, really successful head coach that had made a Sweet 16 at the Division III level, had been really, really winning at Johns Hopkins. We've seen obviously a lot of coaches like a Ben McCollum, Josh Schertz, DeGeorge, a lot of coaches come up from Division II, Division III over the years that have really made a splash. We haven't really seen that from Loeffler, and this is, again, kind of one of those leagues and one of these programs where you're going to immediately feel the presence of a really great coach. When you don't have that really great coach, you're going to kind of produce the results that Loyola Greyhounds have produced the last 2 seasons, which is bottom of the barrel within a really bad league. And so ultimately, I'm kind of looking at Loyola Maryland once again as just a team that's going to be unexciting, uneventful. Will I probably back them at some point in the season because it's just so obvious? Of course, but they're not going to be a team that I hitch my wagon to.
Yeah, I am right there with you. Very well said on that front. As we've got our good friend Rob Donaldson, he does such great work over at Underdog Fantasy. He's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Soups for the Patriot League Conference Preview Edition. And this, I think, could be the wild card. This is a team that I think that it could be absolutely awful. It could be good, though. Holy Cross, they've got Dave Paulson, who we remember over at Bucknell, got the team time and time again to the NCAA tournament. Holy Cross is a team that loves to bomb it from 3. 2 years ago, they were great. Last year, the three-point shooting was not there as they had a lot of injuries, but Joe Nugent, 6'6" combo player, who shoots 40% from 3 is back. Aiden Reichert, 5 points per game, he's back. Now, they do lose a few guys via the transfer portal, but I do feel good about John St. Germain, who was able to give the team some three-point shooting, and the Division II Minnesota Duluth transfer, Cole Hansen, is a guy that I think has some upside as well. Holy Cross has also been awful on defense. They don't get to the free throw line whatsoever. They don't give themselves second chances. But if they hit three-point shots, they've got the possibility to rise up this conference.
And that's kind of where this team, even when you go back to the Bucknell days of Dave Paulson and those squads, you always had a 5'8", 5'9" point guard who was just chucking up threes from beyond the arc, Jimmer range, if you will, Steph Curry range, if you will. They had that dynamic at play last season, but that's really, it was not an efficient shot chucking performance game after game. And so Holy Cross, ultimately, we were talking about games in a vacuum when they're like a 10.5 point favorite or 7.5 point underdog rather, or 10.5 point underdog in conference. Take the money line. Like there's that element of kind of upside of them just hitting shots on any given day. But when you're talking about the totality of their season with that type of style, with the lack of talent in comparison to those old school Bucknell teams, it does kind of feel like we're seeing the twilight here for Dave Paulson as a coach in college basketball and potentially at Holy Cross. I don't know necessarily what their standard of winning is being held up to, but finishing at the bottom of the barrel in nearly back-to-back seasons with a really kind of uninspiring roster this season doesn't really bode well for the long-term trajectory, I would say. And Holy Cross, again, take them in pockets when they potentially have that chance to pull off a massive 4-1 type dog upset, but don't expect a lot of great things when you look back at the season as a whole.
Yeah, and with Holy Cross, it's unfortunate. Bob Cousy used to play for Holy Cross. Bob Cousy, and I believe that he led him to an NIT title way, way, way back in the day. So how the mighty have fallen, though that's obviously a long time ago, because we also saw Bill Russell over at the Downs of San Francisco way back in the day. So yeah, college basketball has changed a little bit since then, and as things have changed, things have stayed the same for Navy. How about 17-1 in the conference last year? They returned more minutes than any team in all of college basketball last year. Not going to be the case this year. A lot of those guys like Aiden Howe, Don Draper down low, they're gone. But they do retain one of their main guards in Jinwoo Kim. 10 points per game, shot 40% from three. And we've seen Navy in the past have a lot of just really good results with generating turnovers. The last few years, they've been much better on the boards. They lose a lot of those big men. So I feel like guys like Cam Cole, Jordan Pennick are going to need to step up in the backcourt. And I don't think that there's any way Navy goes 17-1 in the conference again, but I still don't think that there's going to be a dramatic fall off to where they're back towards the bottom of the conference like Army is. I think it's somewhere between A and B.
I'm right there with you, and I really loved what we saw from John Perry, Navy last season with just the scheduling early on, because it really showed that they weren't afraid to go out there and challenge themselves against some of the bigger programs in college basketball. And I say bigger, and the Penn State's not necessarily a bigger program when you're talking about.
Oh, then they're against North Carolina.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I just liked the fact that they knew they had a good team. They said, hey, let's go test our rubber against the good teams early, because to get an at-large bid, you basically have got to be Miami of Ohio, go run the entire season undefeated. That's what you have to do in any given season to make it as a mid-major at-large bid. So just build yourself up for the Patriot League. That's what Navy did last season, and that was year one of John Perry. Now, John Perry has been a lifer for the most part when you're talking about him at Navy as an assistant, as an associate head coach, whatever it may be. That continuity is really, really important. And I think this year, again, maybe we are seeing kind of the changing of the guard between Navy and Colgate, one passing the other. I would kind of need to see a little bit more proof of that, but in year one, John Perry with a roster that didn't really feel like it had any crazy superb talent relative to the rest of the league, they went out and they showed that they were a dominant force. And so go ahead, put Navy at the very top of these standings. I think they're going to get it done again, Greg.
I do think that Navy is going to be a rock-solid team in this conference, but I take a look at these guys, and typically when you think of American Eagles, you think of people that sell blue jeans and stuff like that. No, the American Eagles of the Patriot League are a team that a few years ago made the NCAA tournament. Bit of a fall off last year. I argue in non-conference play, they got away from their identity, found it again in Patriot League play, but they're bringing back almost the entire band. Maiden Collins, who had 13 points per game, is back. Greg Jones, who had 12.5 points, is back. Great name, by the way. Matt Mayock, Wyatt Needus. Like, these guys that were so good for them. I believe 5 of their top 6 scorers, they're all back from a team that in a Patriot League where not a lot of teams generate turnovers, they were a team that did so. They play a different style. They play super slow. I'm very much in on this American team this year.
I'm right there with you, and we always talk about, Greg, those year 3 and year 4 head coaches, and Dwayne Simpkins was a guy that right away at American, it just felt different, right? When you were watching this team play right out the gate, his first year, I'm looking at the record right now, they went 16-16. It didn't feel like that overall, and ultimately they did finish second in the Patriot League, so that's a lot better than what 16-16 would indicate. But then that second year, when I was really, really buying into the movement of American, not only did they win the darn thing, they made the NCAA tournament, and they went 22-13 in the process and really did well in terms of competing at all across every single level, whether it was at a conference, in conference, or even in the NCAA tournament. They had a chance to advance the round of 64 out of the first 4. And last year, it fell a little bit flat, but again, this is kind of the theme of the episode, and this is going to be a theme for a lot of these mid-major leagues. They get picked apart. Volatility is almost inherent, yet they still went 9-9 in conference play last year. And this year, when you're looking at the roster that they have fourth, I'm right there with you. I tend to think this is a very good looking roster across the board. I think that when you're talking about just their guard play and their ability to defend across the board, that's ultimately where I think the edge within the league is going to be. And so American, Navy, I think it's a collision course. We'll see if a half-court buzzer beater keeps us from seeing these two go at it in a conference tournament game. But ultimately, I do think American is going to be either a 1 or 2 in this league when it's all said and done.
Yep, you talk about American, you talk about Navy. If there's one team that I think can wreck the apple cart, and it's the last team that we have to talk about, it's Lehigh. team brings back three of their top four scorers from a season ago. Hank Alvey is going to be one of the best low post players in this league where there's not a lot of good low post play. Edouard Benoit, 10.5 points, 6 boards. Joshua Ingram, 38.5% three-point shooter. I have a little bit of question mark with depth. We know that Lehigh over the last few years has suffered from some injuries, but this is a team that it feels like they've got really good balance. And you mentioned it, Dr. Reed. It feels like he's been in the Patriot League for like 500 billion years. He's the Obi-Wan Kenobi of the Patriot League, and I think that he gets these guys back in the top three of the conference.
I'm right there with you. I love Brett Reed every single year. I feel like I always take their conference tournament future to win the Patriot League, and last year it finally paid off for me, and I think it was like an 8-1 or 7.5-1 type of odds. Yes, you know, when you're talking about Lehigh, you got to lead off with Brett Reed and probably end the discussion there. Model of consistency, because you go over this tenure, and this is a tenure that I believe has spanned 18, 19 seasons. It's only been 4 or 5 times where they finished below 4th in the conference. And so if you want to talk about a team and just want to talk about a program that's always going to be in good hands, for some reason he decided to stay at this program, and he is very content with life. He'll retire here. He's a lifer here, and he's a legend here. And once again, Lehigh, don't even look at the names on the paper. They'll figure it out. It feels like every single season they have a different dynamic at play, whether that's leaning on their guards, leaning on jump shots, or maybe getting a post scorer in the mix. It doesn't really matter. This is just a really great head coach. And when we've been talking about, Greg, of just having a good coach in these types of leagues to level off that roster turnover volatility, to make your program just, you know, competent year over year over year, this is the poster boy, right? And so, yes, to your point, I think they're going to finish top 4 because they always finish top 4. And ultimately, when it's all said and done, they're going to have a chance to win this whole thing and go back to the NCAA tournament.
I am jazzed up for this conference, my friend. We don't have a whole bunch of minutia. We don't have these fifth-year guys or anything like that. Just straight up basketball, guys that actually go to class. Patriot League, one of my favorite conferences. I know that you love this conference as well. And Rob, I know that you're doing a great job on so many different fronts. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Well, hey, Greg, we are knocking on the door of college basketball season, man, as crazy as that sounds. And I'm jazzed up. For those who want to follow my bets in, you know, kind of leading into college basketball season, and then also once it's there, Twitter/X at RobDFB, and also on my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Rob Donaldson. But as always, Greg, I appreciate having me on, man.
Absolutely. It is always a pleasure to be able to get Rob aboard. Such a wealth of knowledge, especially when it comes to these mid-major conferences where there are a lot of people asleep at the wheel. Rob, he's doing a great job in terms of breaking down all these leagues, and every single time he joins me, lends amazing insight. So big thanks to Rob for joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. This is the Patriot League Conference Preview Edition, so coming in next, I have to give you my projector or finish for this fine conference. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It's always a pleasure to be joined by Rob Donaldson, who does such great work over at Underdog Fantasy, the Rob's Best Bets show, and so much more. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights. He did so once again today. He has joined me for quite a few conference previews, and every single time he does, he makes us all smarter. So a big thanks to Rob for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you my projector or finish for the Patriot League. Once again, these are going to be standalone podcasts with regards to conference preview editions, so I'm not going to go into the news and notes that we saw here in college basketball on Thursday, anything that I missed, and there probably will be something that I missed because, man, things have gotten very, very interesting in college basketball. I will polish those up on the podcast tomorrow, have no fear there, but I do want to give as much sparkle and shine to these conference previews as humanly possible because I do want to make sure that whether you're listening in the middle of August, September, October, November, that you're able to get set for the upcoming college basketball season, that you're getting great information, and that's part of the reason why I'm going with the conferences that I am right now as well, because with regards to these conference preview podcasts, man, it is a little bit brutal trying to do like the Big 12 or something like that with all these fifth-year guys. So we're picking conferences like the Patriot League that may not be as impacted. So let's get into my projector or finish. At number 10 in my projector or finish for the Patriot League, I'm going to be going with Army. Just a rough go of it for Army right now. In this day and age of NIL, it's very difficult for Army to be able to compete. We'll get into Navy a little bit later. They're finding a way, but 343rd was Army in terms of points per possession at home last year. Now, they do bring back Tate Laskowski, who was able to give you about 5.3 rebounds per game, top rebounder from a season ago. And they do bring back a little bit of camaraderie. Dylan Wyatt, Dylan Brenner, these are guys that are going to need to take some strides forward. They did have Jason Holloway give you 2 assists, 10.5 points per contest. And Kevin McCarthy, right around about 8 points per game. But I'm just really not feeling good about this coaching staff in general. A few years ago, they made just a mind-numbing coaching move, which I did not understand whatsoever. And for Kevin Quick, well, it's been quick for this team to go straight down the toilet bowl. They actually were halfway respectable about 2 years ago. That's because they were able to get back Jalen Rucker. In years not involving Jalen Rucker, it's been rough recently for Army, and I do think that's going to be another rough season for them. At number 10 in my projector finish for the Patriot League, I'm going to be going with Army. Number 9 in my projector finish for the Patriot League, I do have to go with Lafayette. Lots of moving parts here for Lafayette. They have been one of those Patriot League teams that has very much been not benefiting from the transfer portal, to say the least. And when it comes to this Lafayette team, you have to be wondering what you're going to be able to get down low on this team. They've got Sharif Jackson, who's averaging 10 points and 5 rebounds per game, but he is the only of their top 6 scorers that returns from last season, so big time question marks there. Now, you did have Shelton Henton. He comes over from Colorado School of the Mines. He was a 42.5% three-point shooter with 10.5 points per game. They really had to go to the non-Division I level, as over at Southern Idaho last year, Cooper Kessler, he was able to give that team about 13.5 points per game, so there's a little bit of upside there, but there's really not a lot of size here for Lafayette. After last few seasons, they've had that one primary post player that you've been able to bank on. You really don't have that this upcoming season for the team. You're looking at someone like a Luka Belvacoa, hopefully I said that correct, 6'11" big man that was glued to the bench. Misha Bastestin, he was another 6'11" big man that just really didn't see a lot of run last year. You have to be wondering what these guys are going to be able to give you moving forward, and I'm going to be giving Lafayette the deficit of the doubt. You hear of the benefit of the doubt. In this case, it is the deficit of the doubt. Number 9 in my projector finish for the Patriot League, going to be going with Lafayette. Number 8 in my projector finish for the Patriot League, I go with Loyola of Maryland. For Loyola of Maryland, they do lose a lot of those top scorers from a season ago. Maximo Ortega was averaging about 3.5 points, shot 41.5% from 3. He's going to need to step up. Troy Cicero is really one of your big guys that comes back from a season ago. About 6 points per game, shot 38% from 3. And they've got some solid three-point shooting, like Sam Springer, 5 points per game. He shot 38% from three-point range, so a little bit of upside there. And then they bring in Alex Huguet. Hopefully I said that correct. Alex Huguet Carrasco, who was averaging about 2 points, 2 rebounds per game over at Louisiana Monroe last year. And Abdullah Amzil, he was over at UC Davis last season, was relatively glued to the bench. They're going to need these guys to be able to step up. DeAndre Harrison, who was over at UMKC. So for Loyola Maryland, they actually landed a few transfers. You don't find that very often in the Patriot League due to the academic standards, but they bring in a few of those guys. But Josh Loeffler, it's clearly an uphill battle for him right now. Got the team to 8-10 last season, but I am the transfer of power from Tavarius Hardy on over to him. Thus far has been a little bit hit or miss, to say the least, for Loyola Maryland, just losing these guys like a Braden Speed in the backcourt, Jacob Theodusu. I think that it's going to be a rough go of it for them. They lose all their top 4 scorers from a season ago, and I do think that it's going to be a downward spiral here for Loyola Maryland moving forward. At number 8 in my projector finish for the Patriot League, I go with Loyola Maryland. Number 7 in my projector finish, I've got Holy Cross for the Patriot League. For Holy Cross, man, it's been all sorts of holy not great with regards to their defense. The offense has a little bit of something, and they're getting back Joe Nugent, who was a little bit banged up last year. 12 points per contest, shot 40.5% from 3 as a 6'6" combo player. I love that. John St. Germain, he's going to be back after he shot 36% from 3 last year. You've got a guy that comes in for Division II Minnesota Duluth, and Cole Harrison, who he was averaging about 15 points, a little bit over steal per contest, another 37% three-point shooter. But that's it for Holy Cross. When are these guys going to play a lick of defense whatsoever? Now, I recognize for Holy Cross, it was a little bit of a unholy situation that Dave Paulson was taking over a few years ago. And we remember Dave Paulson, all those teams that he led to the NCAA tournament with the bracket bust and Bucknell Bison. He's been trying to get things online, but Holy Cross year in and year out, just outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're actually not too bad with regards to the 3-point shooting defense last year, but outside the top 340 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, a team that just has not been able to grab any second and third chances whatsoever themselves. They don't have a lot of size on the roster, so they're not going to be getting those second and third chances as well. They really don't force a lot of turnovers, so that's going to limit Holy Cross. Even though they've got some good 3-point shooting, I think that they're going to be a solid offensive team. Defense keeps them towards the bottom of the conference. I've got Holy Cross number 7 in my projector finish for the Patriot League. And number 6 in my projector finish for the Patriot League, I'm going to be going with Bucknell. Now, if you look at a lot of the just computer rankings, what have you, they've got Bucknell in the bottom 2, bottom 3 of this conference. But I'm a believer in John Griffin, who you may recall. He was a part of that bracket bust and Bucknell Bison team that took down Kansas in the 2005 NCAA tournament. And you have to replace him on Norris. Like, that's rough. 16 points, 4+ rebounds per game, if I'm not mistaken, transferred on over to the Atlantic 10. And then these guys like Archuleta Spindone and company, that's going to be a tough road to hoe, but Jaden Williams was a guy that was able to average about 7.5 points, 4 assists per game. That at the very least gives you a little bit of camaraderie on offense, and boy, do they need it. They're in 28th in the country in terms of 3-point shooting percentage last year at about 30.5%. They're in 28th overall in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They were 296th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. That's all not good, but Kyle Marshall is an upside guy that comes over from Air Force. He was averaging about 7 points, 4 boards, steal per contest, shot 35.5% from 3 2 years ago. Alexander Pachuki, hopefully I got that correct. He's a guy that I think has some upside as well. 36% 3-point shooter. You get back Jacob Meacham, you get back Patrick O'Brien, guys that were relatively glued to the bench last year, and I do think that they're going to be able to take some strides forward and prevent Bucknell from being in the cellar. For Bucknell, I mean, it's not too long ago that they were sitting towards the top of the Patriot League. I do think that they've got one of the more underrated mid-major coaches out there in John Griffin, a guy that truly loves this bracket bust and Bucknell Bison program. They were just number 1 2 years ago during the 2024-25 season. They were towards the bottom last year. I think you get somewhere between A and B this year. I've got Bucknell in my projector finish for the Patriot League here at number 6. Number 5 in my projector finish for the Patriot League, I'm going to be going with Navy. Navy brought back more minutes and just more starters last year than pretty much any other team in all of college basketball. They were a nice, rock-solid team, but now they do lose a lot of those pieces, and now John Perry, he's in his 2nd year as a coach of this team. Do have to have some question marks. He does bring back Jinwoo Kim, a guy that was able to average 10 points per game, is a nice dynamo 3-point shooter, and then Jordan Pennick, he's been able to average about 7 points per contest in his career here at Navy. So these are going to be guys that you're going to be able to build around. Shock, surprise, surprise. Navy not really bringing anyone via the transfer portal. That's just this day and age, but Cam Cole is a little bit of an upside guy along David Burnett. These are guys I think are going to be able to help out this Navy team. You do lose the likes of Aiden Kehoe. That's really brutal because this was a team that was tremendous on glass. Team was 27th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and I do think that the defense is going to be there. Typically, before Kehoe and those big men, they were a team that always generated a lot of turnovers. I think that they're going to be looking to these guys like Jinwoo Kim and Pennick in the backcourt to be able to do so. And for Cole, who I mentioned before, about a 38.5% 3-point shooter. So these are guys I think are going to be solid. You're going to need some of these freshmen to step up because right now it looks like a thin rotation for Navy and a team that is going to be taking some steps back down low. But I do think that they're going to be able to stay more towards the middle of the conference. So in my projector finish here for the Patriot League, I've got Navy at Mambo number 5. Number 4 in my projector finish for the Patriot League, I'm going to be going with Boston U. Boston U had that really nice upset of Navy in the Patriot League tournament last season, and for Boston U, they actually took a massive setback on defense last year. They're in 14th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. This system in general, you know that this team is going to be playing very slowly, and they were just a good 3-point shooting team. How about 5th in the country shooting 38.8% from 3? Now, they're going to be losing some of those guys that were so good for them, like Michael Aaron McNair, but you bring back Kyron Anderson. He was able to give this team 13 points, 5 boards, a little bit of a steal per contest. He was really good 2 years ago. He was in for, I think, 1 game last year. Getting him back, that's able to replace a lot of what you lose from last year's team. And then you got Sam Hughes, 9 points, 3 rebounds, 37% 3-point shooter. Emzar Abdullah. He was a guy that was able to give you 8.5 points, 3.5 rebounds per game. And you did have Matai Baptiste, who was limited to 11 games 2 seasons ago, missed the entirety of last season. He's a guy with a little bit of upside to help this team out down low. He was averaging about 4.3 rebounds, a little bit over a steal per contest. And then Dante Singer, hopefully you got that correct, he was a 37% three-point shooter as well. And then you'll bring in a big man from the bench of the Penn Quakers and Michelangelo Oberte. That should be able to help out this team as well. For Boston U, they're going to need to be better on defense because even though they played slowly, so it didn't look like they were giving up a ton of points, they weren't giving like A+ points up because they were just playing at such a slow system. They are going to need to be a little bit better there, but even though you do lose the likes of Chance Glyden, Ben Defty, and company, I do think that this is going to be a team that's going to be relatively rock solid because I do think that they're going to muscle up a little bit more down low. So in my projector or finish for the Patriot League, I've got Boston U here at number 4. Number 3 in my projector or finish for the Patriot League, I'm going with Colgate. Now, Colgate has been the big bad wolf in this conference for so long, but it feels like they've lost their fastball just a little bit here over the last few years. Navy just completely ran the conference last season, and for Colgate, they just always seem to have that do-it-all guy. Like last year, it was Jalen Cox, who gave you 18 points, 5 boards, 5 assists per contest. It goes all the way back to the Burns days when he, like 4 or 5 years ago, when they were consistently making the NCAA tournament, was doing that. Hey, Braden Smith, who transferred on over to Gonzaga, he was able to take over that torch a few years ago as well. So they're going to be in search of that. I do think that Andrew Elisenko, I'm going to get that last name incorrect. Andrew, he's going to be able to help out with that. 14.5 points, 7 boards, 2.5 assists per contest. Typically, it's more of a guard that does this, though. But I do think that he's got the ability to be able to be that do-it-all sort of dynamo because he did shoot 38% from three-point range last season. And then you got Sam Wright, who was Mr. Right for the team, 12 points, 4 boards. And then Josh Harry, who was able to give you about 8 points, 3.5 rebounds per game, 37% three-point shooter. I like Parker Jones, but now you're going to need to be able to get someone like a Cooper Wright to be able to step up because while it's nice that you get Jones back after you pretty much missed all last season due to injury, Wright is a guy that just really wasn't effective for the team. He's going to need to take some strides forward, give Colgate a little bit more of something, and this was a Colgate team that with regards to their interior, shall we say, defense, their rebounding was a little bit fragile, so I still have some question marks there for Colgate. In my projector or finish, I've got them number 3 here in the Patriot League. Number 2 in my projector or finish for the Patriot League, the Lehigh Mountain Hawks. You've got a doctor at the helm for this team, Dr. Brett Reed, and I do think that him bringing back so many guys from a season ago is going to be huge. You're bringing back 3 of last year's top 4 scorers, Hank Alvey, who is able to give you 15.7 boards, steal per contest, 1.8 blocks per game. That guy gets me jazzed up because you don't necessarily have the world's greatest size or the world's greatest low post play here in the Patriot League. He should be a dominator right away. This was a team that was 56th in the country in three-point shooting percentage last year, hovering right around about 36.1%, and actually a top 200 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. The problem was they were just absolutely destroyed down low, and Edouard Benoit, I think he's going to be able to take some steps forward, 10.6 rebounds per game. Joshua Ingram, 38.5% three-point shooter. He was able to supply the team with 10.5 points, 5 boards, 3 assists, a little bit over a steal per contest. Caleb Thomas, he's able to give you 4.5 points per game. And Andrew Urasevich, he's a guy that was able to step up, giving you about 7.5 points per game. Now in the Patriot League, you're not going to be bringing in a lot of transfers. For Lehigh, they're going to be rolling the dice on a few freshmen to be able to play more of a role. They're not going to need these guys to be starters or anything like that, but can like a Caesar Burrows be able to give you just a little bit of something? If he's able to do so, I think that Lehigh has a lot of potential here. I've got them number 2 in my projector or finish for the Patriot League, and then number 1 in my projector or finish for the Patriot League. They are not selling blue jeans. They're selling trips to the NCAA tournament. The American Eagles, ladies and gentlemen. You bring back Jalen Iturribe. You bring back Greg Jones. You bring back Wyatt Needus. This is a team that I think is going to be locked, loaded, ready for bear. A team that made the NCAA tournament a few seasons ago. Matt Mayock is a guy that's 6'7", that's able to bomb it from three-point range. It's an American team that you know that they're going to be playing slow year in and year out. They're always a bottom 75 team in terms of total possessions per game. Played a little bit too fast for their own good in non-conference play last year. Slowed it down. They were getting better and better as the season went along. Maiden Collins is a guy that I like, 13.5 points, 5 boards, 1.3 steals per contest. Greg Jones, who I mentioned before, 2 steals, 2 assists and a steal per contest last season. Iturribe was a 35% three-point shooter. Nides, he was able to give you 7.5 points and a steal per contest, shot 35.5% from 3. Now, this is a team that's going to need to be a little bit more disciplined this year. 338th in the country in terms of fouls committed on a per possession basis. 40th in terms of turnovers turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They turned over a little bit of a new leaf with that defense. They were a team that sold out for turnovers. They were trying to be very aggressive. You've got a lot of active hands that are back from the season ago, and while they might not be like what we saw out of Stephen F. Austin with the Havoc defense or something like that, the Patriot League doesn't have a lot of teams that generate turnovers. American is trying a little bit of a new style here. I think that it's going to be highly effective. I think that gets them back towards the top of the conference with all that they bring back. Give me the American Eagles to win the conference. I've got them number one in my projector finish for the Patriot League. And that'll wrap things up for the Patriot League Conference Preview Edition right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. If you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letter CM, naming does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Once again, a big thanks to Rob Donaldson. He does such great work over at Underdog Fantasy. He joined me here in segment number 2. We're going to be rolling along with these conference preview podcasts. We're now going to be into the mid-major S's, so the SoCon, Sun Belt, conferences like that. They're going to be getting their moment in the sun relatively soon. I'm going to try to stray away from these conferences that should be impacted by these fifth-year guys, because that's just a big giant whatchamado and a big giant ball of wax right now that we all need to figure out. But have no fear, all 32 conferences will get a specialized podcast like you heard today here on the Patriot League. And once we get back in season, picks and analysis on every single game, every single day, and you don't have to worry about any missed podcasts, because we are up to over 2,440 straight days without a missed podcast. So I'll be back with you guys once again tomorrow. Thank you so much.